he says that the newspaper was a goof and that they try not to put a date on anything.
But you found dates on a lot of things.
I know. I don't know how to explain it. Is continuity a lie? Does the timeline not matter? Is what the hell is happening to you?
What is this? Maddie, help me!
I can't. This desk is too close to the wall. I can't squeeze out.
I still want to destroy Jay's review's career.
It's everywhere. Jay!
Systems operational. The data must be
reassessed.
By now, most of you are probably aware that Justice League Dark Apokolips War marks the finale of the DC animated movie universe, a continuity of interlocking films that began with 2013's Justice League The Flashpoint Paradox and features a grand total of 17 films and 2 comic series. When the channel first covered this universe for the release of Batman Hush, an attempt was made to formulate a viewing order relying mainly on the use of hard real-world dates as seen on newspapers, computer screens, and other sources within the films. But this approach became a problem when Hush, set after the events of Reign of the Supermen, featured a newspaper that, if taken literally, would have set the film 2 years prior. The wrinkles in the timeline accelerated even further with the next release, Wonder Woman Bloodlines, which suggested a 5-year gap between it and Justice League War, as opposed to the 6-year gap that had been calculated from late 2012 to mid 2018. A gap that shrunk even further when James Tucker suggested that the events of Bloodlines intro took place over the span of a full year, leaving only 4 years to squeeze the events of the DCAMU continuity into. Of course, First Instinct suggests that perhaps this film just takes place earlier in the timeline, but due to Wonder Woman's uniform being consistent from the flashback in this film all the way through Reign of the Supermen, Bloodlines would still have to occur afterwards due to a costume change being part of this movie's plot. Not to mention, James Tucker put out another tweet confirming its placement after the events of Batman Hush. Granted, tweets are just a secondary source to what's seen on screen, and those could be wrong from time to time, but I see no reason Bloodlines should come before Hush, and even if it did, it wouldn't change much anyway because of the whole costume thing. So how does the shortened time gap work? With on-screen dates being more or less out the window, it made sense to me to see what I could figure out from James Tucker himself, and after combing through his tweets, that seemed to make things even more complicated. For instance, in this one, he suggests a year between each Batman movie that was out at the time, but Batman vs. Robin suggests that Damian hadn't quite been around a full year yet since first showing up in Son of Batman.
After all these months together, all I've taught you.
There was another in which he suggests Damian was 13 during Batman Bad Blood, despite Talia only having known Bruce for 12 years.
I have thought of little else for the last 12 years.
And the same tweet also states he was 12 during Batman vs. Robin.
He's a 10-year-old boy.
And suggests that 2 years passed between Son of Batman to Batman vs. Robin, which once again doesn't really work because
after all these months together.
Granted, these tweets come from the far distant past of 2016, so it's possible that things may have changed since then. I mean, maybe not Damian's age. I don't expect a George Lucas type remaster occurred that retroactively changed both my physical and digital copies to making Damian's age to be 10 now while it was 12 at the time. Sure, they changed Jason Todd's hair in Batman The Adventures Continue, but there's no way they replaced my DVDs. right? While perusing through the Twitter timeline, a conversation between James Tucker and director Sam Liu caught my attention.
Our schedule kept being shuffled on these movies, but I think that we produced a movie in between Death and Rain. I think it was SS, H2P. There was a point where it was so confusing that we thought an in-continuity movie would come out before Rain.
Haha, there were characters James put in because of timeline, then when slots got changed we would have to remove or readjust characters. Knockout.
I forget the order, but apparently I put Knockout and other Furies in one shot of Rain, so that would connect to her being in SS, H2P, but when the order switched it was cut. Continuity on the fly isn't a perfect science, lol.
Yup, and that's what also cemented SS, HTP was between the two-parter. Sorry at the end, I'm Sheridan, this was not meant to be an overzealous justification of the timeline, frowny face.
Yeah, there's no way to be overzealous about this timeline, lol.
If you'll remember from the previous video, Suicide Squad Hell to Pay ended up being placed a full 2 years prior to Reign of the Supermen in a sort of, you can watch it this way or even this way scenario in relation to the Teen Titans films in the series. But with this exchange in mind, I decided to revisit the film, and lo and behold,
word is to give her 6 months tops, so she really wants the card bad now.
Amanda Waller was supposed to die within 6 months. Given that she reappeared in Batman Hush, this is something that should have been caught in the last video. But the Watchtower Database was too busy focusing on obscure dates on newspapers, and as a result, missed a clue that was right in front of their faces. But I digress. Curious as to whether or not the line still held true with the film having been moved from its initial slot, it only made sense to pose the question to James Tucker, who responded,
well, there's nothing to contradict the time frame based on the events in Hush as far as I remember. Plus, I'm sure Waller hung on longer than 6 months.
Now, of course, this is a bit of an open-ended statement, but it reads to me as though the intention is for Waller's eventual death to be as close as possible to 6 months apart from the events of Hell to Pay. And spoilers ahead for Justice League Dark Apokolips War.
How did Amanda Waller let a lunatic like you become leader of the squad?
Easy! She died. Cancer!
So it seems as though everything from Hell to Pay up to the beginning of Apokolips War happens in a span of roughly 6 months. A time gap that we see happen in between the death of Superman and Reign of the Supermen films.
It's been 6 months since Doomsday, and the world is still shaken by the death of Kal-El of Krypton.
Which means Suicide Squad Hell to Pay, its sequel comic, and due to Jason Blood's appearance in said comic, Justice League Dark, where he dies, all have to occur pretty shortly before the death of Superman, while Batman Hush, Wonder Woman Bloodlines, and the beginning of Apokolips War all take place shortly after Reign of the Supermen. For simplicity's sake, we'll mark the latter ones as being 4 years AW, or after war, and the earlier ones as 3.5 years AW. And now we're left with these 8 films. And for the sake of thoroughness, Teen Titans Go versus Teen Titans. Off the top, we can go ahead and knock out Justice League War as occurring in 0 AW, continuing our use of the after war dating, and Justice League Throne of Atlantis still remains shortly after, also in 0 AW. As mentioned in the previous video, writer Heath Corson suggested the two films were about a week apart.
When we pick up, it's basically, I think, a week later from where war ended.
And it's a sentiment shared by James Tucker as well, who has stated that those movies are the ones that are closest together. While we're here though, I know some people were confused about Manta's reappearance in Suicide Squad Hell to Pay, since he seemingly got eaten by a shark at the end of Throne of Atlantis. But villains never really die if you don't see the body, and that's a point James Tucker has addressed multiple times. Not to mention, he returns again in Apokolips War, where we see him die for real. As you may recall, Throne of Atlantis was packed with a short titled Nightwing and Robin, which was set concurrently with that film's events. Being that this solidifies Damian to already be active as Robin, this now solidifies Son of Batman to occur before Justice League War in order to maintain War and Throne being the two films that were closest to each other. Moving forward to Batman vs. Robin, the previous estimation that that the film takes place approximately 3 months after Throne of Atlantis, or 0.25 years AW, remains intact. As mentioned before, this is in part due to Bruce stating Damian has been with him for a matter of months since the events of Son of Batman. The presence of snow, suggesting we're in winter or early spring, which wouldn't be long after the football state finals, an event typically held in November that we see in Justice League War. And finally, Bruce's relationship with Samantha Vanover.
Alfred's the only one who could ever get me to laugh.
After 3 months together, I like to think I can too.
Which we later find out was a Court of Owls plot. The court, of course, being set up in the aforementioned Nightwing and Robin short. So, for a quick recap, this now has our timeline fleshed out to look something like this. The DCAMU is created by the events of Justice League the Flashpoint Paradox, perhaps a topic to pick up on at some other time. Son of Batman follows afterwards. Up to 8 months later, we're at the events of Justice League War, starting our after-war dating system. Shortly after, Throne of Atlantis and Nightwing and Robin occur. 0.25 years AW gives us the events of Batman vs. Robin. Approximately 3.5 years AW, Suicide Squad Hell to Pay, its tie-in comic Justice League Dark, The Death of Superman, and its tie-in comic occur. 4.0 years AW, the events of Reign of the Supermen, Batman Hush, Wonder Woman Bloodlines, and the beginnings of Justice League Dark Apokolips War play out. And 2 years later, in 6.0 years AW, we finally arrive at the main plot of Apokolips War. So now we have these 5 movies left to figure out. The easiest to place of these are going to be the 2 main Teen Titans movies, Teen Titans The Judas Contract and Justice League vs. Teen Titans. We already know that the 2 films take place a year apart due to Judas Contract taking place on Tara's 1-year anniversary with the Titans, and her arrival at the tower taking place during Justice League vs. Teen Titans post-credits scene. But also in Judas Contract, we see Raven gift Damian with Titus, the Great Dane puppy. The next time we see him, in Death of Superman, Titus is fully matured, a process that takes 18 months, which now places Teen Titans The Judas Contract in 2 AW, and Justice League vs. the Teen Titans in 1 AW. From here, we know Batman Bad Blood must take place after Batman vs. Robin, when we see Damian leave Gotham for the monastery where he resides in Bad Blood, and before Justice League vs. Teen Titans, due to Damian having returned home by that point, placing that film somewhere between 0.25 to 1 year AW, which leaves us with the 2 more difficult films to place: Constantine City of Demons, and due to multiversal shenanigans, Teen Titans Go vs. Teen Titans.
These be the real serious Titans.
And they have an even more handsome Robin.
While there aren't very many clues to help us pin down the placement of Teen Titans Go vs. Teen Titans, we can safely assume it's sometime between 2 and 3.5 years AW, after Judas Contract, as Nightwing has his red suit from that film, but prior to Death of Superman, where we see Cyborg being ripped apart by Doomsday and subsequently rebuilt with a new look in Reign of the Supermen. As for Constantine City of Demons, there aren't very many points of continuity within the film to help place it. In the previous video, its placement came down to this newspaper dated October 30th, 2018. But as we've covered throughout this video, on-screen dates don't seem to be reliable in the context of the DCAMU. And now with Justice League Dark Apokolips War, following up on the Constantine-Zatanna relationship we saw begin in the first JL Dark flick, plot points from City of Demons feel a bit out of place when set between the 2, as would be the case if following J.M. DeMatteis's suggestion that the film served as a sequel. So it would seem as though Butch Luckick's suggestion that the film serves as a Justice League Dark prequel is what makes the most sense after all.
It's a prequel. It's actually more his origin story of why he became the Constantine that we know from Dark and anything else.
Though, past that, there doesn't seem to be any clear indicators in regards to the film's placement amongst all of the others. So, hypothetically, it could take place anytime between 0 years AW up to 3.5 years AW, or maybe even before Justice League War. And this brings us to the moment that you've all been waiting so patiently for. On screen, you'll see the complete viewing order as we laid out in this video. All the the way from 2013's Flashpoint Paradox up until this year's Justice League Dark Apokolips War. Some of you may feel the need to point out that we glossed over Batman Assault on Arkham, but
the movie takes place, I would say, maybe 2 years before the first video game, which is Arkham Asylum.
So leave some other comments below. Like, which one of the DCAMU movies do you enjoy the most? Personally, I'm a big fan of Apokolips War, City of Demons, and... Is that... I hear... Mother... Take positions! We have no idea what to expect on the other end of this call. Right, on my way!
On my way.